We're joined by Jacob Rees-Mogg's former special advisor, Fred de Fossard. Thanks for joining us, Fred. It looks like a sort of open warfare in the Tory party. Suella, of course, has declared war on the government for its basic failure over migration, both legal and illegal. Now we have Dame Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, pitching in. We have the New Conservatives, who are also attacking their own government, per se. The New Conservatives have described migration, particularly legal migration, you know, 1 million or so a year coming in legally, as an existential crisis for the Tory party, calling this situation do or die. They genuinely feel that unless the Tories get a grip of this out-of-control situation, the Tories in themselves may cease to exist. I mean, this is really serious, isn't it?
Thank you very much for having me on. I agree with you about the seriousness of it. It is quite extraordinary. But to those of us who have followed the migration policy the government has introduced since 2019-2020, you can kind of see how this was coming for a long time. Obviously, when the British public voted to leave the European Union under the great banner of take back control, including take back control of our borders, that was precipitated by migration of, 300,000 a year. Now we have net migration of 750, 650,000 a year. I don't think that's anyone's idea of control. But the government took a few steps over the last 4 years or so, which has kind of made this possible. Priti Patel rightly referenced the points-based system, and it's a very flexible system, which I think is to its advantage. It is, as she said, everyone comes with a job offer, they're sponsored. But what the government can do is increase the thresholds for salary caps. Instead, while Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, the government reduced those thresholds from around 30,000 to, I think, around 24,000 or 25,000 pounds. It would be a very sensible policy to take advantage of the flexibility of that system to increase them steadily, to show that the government does actually have control over this system.
What I don't understand here is we've had from the Conservatives now for the best part of a decade a promise that they will reduce migration to the tens of thousands. I mean, that is for the birds when you're looking at gross inward figures being over 1 million now. I mean, it's eye-watering. But I don't understand where the buck stops here. You talk about the points-based system, and you're right. You know, in theory, this should be a tap that we can turn on and off. But there are measures that I think would make sense to reduce those numbers, whether that is getting rid of the generosity in terms of dependency visas and spousal visas, whether that's capping overall numbers, whether that's actually creating a moratorium with exclusions for certain sectors. None of these measures are being taken, things that the government could do. It is within their gift. So why, when we can see the numbers have hit such record highs, when the party still has a majority, when everyone in that party seems to argue that they want sensible immigration, why, oh why, year after year are we just seeing that number go up?
Alex, you're reading my mind, I think. You make very good points and very good recommendations about specific measures which could happen, and we have the power to do it. It's not like illegal immigration where there's this difficult web of treaties and other laws which govern this. Legal migration, we have total sovereignty over it. I think the things that hold it back is the way in which every government department has its own sort of people lobbying it, its own stakeholder networks, and they all end up speaking with a totally contradictory voice. So ministers say we need to cut immigration, but then the health secretary will be screamed and shouted at by said, well, the NHS and the social care sector is dependent by a certain percent on people from overseas, therefore if we reduce immigration, backlogs will go up. Farming unions will tell the agriculture secretary that cabbages will rot in the fields, and even the business secretary will be prodded by lobbyists representing the various manufacturing sectors or other business groups saying we won't be able to build any cars, we won't be able to run our factories. So we have this whole nexus of people saying it is essential. And I think part of the problem with the British economic model of the last 20 years is if you're an employer, say you run a factory, you're kind of incentivized to pull the lever of immigration because our tax system until the autumn statement made it very difficult to buy new machinery. The business rate system punishes you for improving your premises with higher taxes. Energy costs are getting even more expensive, and there doesn't seem to be much sign of them really coming down to a competitive level. And the housing and planning situation is so bad that British people find it very hard to move for work within the country cost effectively. So we're kind of like funneling everyone into this place where the only thing the government's letting them do is ask for more immigration and then use things like the shortage occupation list, where you can pay 20% the going rate for jobs including florists, takeaway shop managers, architects, and even teachers. So like, a minister might say one thing, but this system exists to push them entirely in the other way. And it's essential that ministers, MPs, politicians change this in the next 6 months to a year. But I don't know how quickly this will be able to bear fruit.
You hit upon one of the problems here, Fred, which is students, I believe, in their final year of university, allowed to bring their families over. So are a lot of the immigrants who work in social care. So Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, has suggested we stop that facility because, you know, you let one person in, you actually end up with about 8. You end up with their entire family. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, when he actually found out about this, I think it's about a year ago now, he said, this is ridiculous. He said, the student situation, he said, this is ridiculous. We've got to do something about it. Well, here we are, 1 year on, nothing. Why doesn't this Prime Minister understand that it's not good enough to just say we're going to do things and never do them? It seems to be his shtick. He just declares, we're going to take action on this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to stop the boats, and then he doesn't do anything. There's the problem. So he's not only getting a rebellion from his backbenchers, from the New Conservatives, from former Home Secretaries, but also it looks as if his immigration minister, Robert Jenrick, has had enough as well. He's drawn up his own set of proposals to try and sort this situation out, but once again, they're being ignored.
Look, you paint a pretty good picture of the dysfunction in Whitehall over this sort of thing. The student dependence was an issue raised when I was in government over a year ago. But as I said, the way in which it kind of works with the Education Department, who actually has a totally contradictory policy to the rest of the government. The Education Department wants a high score of how many overseas students it brings into the country because, you know, at least in the short term, they pay fees. But then the dependency really does start to undermine this whole policy. I've been seeing reports today of people at the Office for National Statistics saying that international students coming to Swansea University are bringing parents and even grandparents with them. That is nobody's idea, right? Yeah, it's mad. That is nobody's idea of the international student that we used to associate, that we would think of maybe 10 years ago, where you'll have one person coming to do a PhD, maybe bringing a spouse with them or a spouse and one child. But the idea, but then now instead we seem to be having people bringing whole families, and the rates of conversion of student visas into full-time long-term visas seems to be increasing significantly. So there used to be an idea that going around that it's fine that we have high levels of student immigration because everyone leaves. And I think only until before 2018, about 80 to 90%, maybe over 90% of people did leave quite quickly and went on about in the rest of the world or went back home. That is changing rapidly. So the student migration system is steadily becoming a route into permanent residency. A little bit like the problems we had in 2010, which Theresa May had to sort out with the whole private colleges visa selling issue.
Fred, thank you ever so much. I mean, blimey, I think the three of us should get together and run this country.
We could sort the country out.
Do a better job, wouldn't we?
What a trio we'd be.
I know.